Climate change is one of the major problems in today's society. If you don't know what that is, it's defined by the UNFCCC as a change of climate that is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity, altering the composition of the global atmosphere. Many countries are starting to feel the effects of climate change. In Norway specifically, the changes in the Arctic region are becoming dramatic and worrying. Join us while we provide you knowledge on everything you need to know about Norway's contribution to climate change and its recommendations to help it.
This has economic effects on Norway specifically because Norway's people are more reliant on natural resources dependent on how the climate is. Climate patterns will obviously be harder to predict with like the changing instability, and specifically reindeer are really popular in Norway, and their food, which is lichen, it freezes before it's covered by like the protective layer of snow that comes like during the annual like change in the weather. But with like global warming happening, it causes financial losses to the Sami people, which are the indigenous people of Norway, who herd reindeer and make a living off of reindeer herding. So these like freeze and thaw cycles will be like more frequent with all this like instability. This can be an opportunity because new plants can adapt to milder environments, not so harsh, all of the snow, because the general climate in Norway is very harsh, very cold all of the time, year round, and tourism also can grow faster with frequent periods of warmer weather.
A second vulnerability for Norway is their increase in rainfall. So with more rainfall, that means that there's less snow, so the springs usually double and winters are shorter. And then for the social and cultural aspect, the acid rain can cause problems with agriculture and erosion. And that means that there's more damage to homes because homes start to flood and buildings get damaged. So with the economy, property damages come back to the economy because it costs extra money to fix everything that's gotten ruined. And that puts animals at an extra risk as well because their homes are ruined and there's too much rainfall to keep up with their regular day lives. And then an opportunity for this is that the people are actually benefiting from the increase of rain and the reduce of snowfall because this means that the grains in the harvest during the fall time are able to last longer and they're able to make more foods and produce more. And then with the economy, an increase in river flow allows hydropower to produce more electricity and support power during the wintertime. And then for the social and cultural, as winter becomes shorter, the fall and spring reduces.
Okay, so in Norway, due to climate change, the mean temperature is increasing. The average temperature has risen from 1.8 to 2.2 degrees Celsius, which is substantial for the amount of time that it's been between. The temperatures have been like more in the winter, melting the majority of the ice that Norway has. The cultural and social aspect of this causes like a destruction of habitat for all of the wildlife, and it's spreading alien species, spreading new bacteria. The ecosystem is trying to like rebalance itself. The economic aspect is that Norway has become one of the world's most leading welfare states, and income levels are changing dramatically. An opportunity of this is benefiting the farmers because Norway subsists on like a lot of like agricultural like farming and crops, and so fruits and vegetables are growing at a rapid rate, which is very good for the economy, very good for all of like the social aspects. Prices are going down, and there's a wider range of food to choose from.
Okay, so another vulnerability is the ice is starting to melt. So what's been happening now is in more recent years, the snow has been falling and then it hits the ice before the lake is frozen. So with the ice melting, it's making it very unreliable for all the Sami peoples, and it's making them having to change their journeys, how they're getting around. It's making it difficult for them to hunt as well and grow their crops because with the ice, the plants aren't used to growing in that type of weather, so that means that they also make less profit in the end. But an opportunity of the melting ice is that the Sami people are starting to begin to think of other methods and ways that they can go around their daily life. So it kind of makes them have better practice and knowledge, and they become wiser in the end because they're more well-rounded and they begin to realize that they can go around obstacles when this happens. And they just start to basically adapt to the new environment, and it also helps with gas fields. And it's actually fast expanding for the oil. But then an opportunity of the ice melting is that the Sami people are getting used to having to work around the change in the environment, so they're just becoming more knowledgeable and they have to practice when things don't go the way that they usually do with the climate, so it just kind of makes them very well-rounded in situations where they have to think fast of what else to do and what works.
Prior to Industrial Revolution, Norway's economy was based on agriculture, timber, and fishing. Fishing was supplemented to crop growing and livestock raising on small farms. Norwegian lived under condition of scarcity, although hunger was rare. Self-owned farmers were a main way of work in Norwegian agriculture, but farmers started to run out of land available for farming during the 19th century. The first textile mill was found in Norway in the middle of the 19th century. The industrial enterprises was found after the founding of the banks, and industries provide employment for a large amount of individuals who worked in agriculture sections, and their wages were much higher than those from agriculture.
Fossil fuels. Fossil fuel is a term used to describe a group of energy sources that were formed from ancient plants and organisms during the Carboniferous period approximately 360 to 286 million years ago, even before the age of dinosaurs. At that time, the land was covered with swamps filled with organisms and plants. As they died, they sank to the bottom of swamps and oceans, and over millions of years started decomposing under layers of sand, clay, and other minerals. Different types of fossil fuels formed depending on the combination of organic matter, temperature, time, and pressure conditions while decomposing. There are three major types of fossil fuels: coal, oil, and natural gas. Coal was formed from ferns, plants, and trees, which hardened due to pressure and heat. Oil was formed from small organisms like zooplankton and algae, where pressure caused the more complex organic matter to decompose. Natural gas was formed by the same process as oil, only it was exposed to more heat and pressure, causing it to further decompose and turn into a gaseous form. Fossil fuels are sought-after energy sources because they have a high energy density. They are the world's dominant energy source. Fossil fuels have a variety of applications from electricity production to transport fuels. They can also be used to make a variety of common products, from plastics to cosmetics to even some medicines. These resources have powered industrialization over history and continue to do so today. Fossil fuels can be an abundant and cheap, or in some cases, a scarce and expensive form of energy, depending on geographic location. For this reason, geopolitical issues arise due to scarcity caused by the natural geographic allocation of these highly valuable resources. Fossil fuels are considered non-renewable resources because they take millions of years to form, which means that once they are used, the resources will not be replenished in a human lifetime, The gradual depletion of the most accessible fossil fuel reserves have forced companies to develop technologies for extracting more challenging or unconventional reserves. In many cases, this means additional safety and environmental concerns as well as higher costs. Fossil fuels are also the largest emitters of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas which causes climate change. In addition, their production causes both environmental and human health issues. These concerns have triggered society to look at alternate sources of energy that are more environmentally sustainable and renewable. That's fossil fuels.
In May 1963, Norway asserted its right over natural resources in the sector of the North Sea. The exploration started on July 19, 1966, when Ocean Traveler drilled its first hole, but the exploration was not successful until 3 years later. The Ocean Viking found oil on August 21st. In March 2005, the Administration of Foreign Affairs stated that the Barents Sea holds 1/3 of the world's remaining gas and oil. And the fun fact is that Norway has 1.6% of the US population but produced 54% of the US emission.
Norway has become the first country to ban deforestation, with its eye set on rainforests. Now, you may have noticed Norway itself doesn't have much in the way of rainforests, but its parliament has promised to make sure the goods it purchases don't contribute to their deforestation. A spokesperson for Rainforest Foundation Norway said in recent years many private companies have made similar commitments, but this is the first time a government has done so. Palm oil, soy, beef, and wood are some of the products that push deforestation the most. One study has shown that between 2000 and 2012, commercial agriculture was responsible for 71% of tropical deforestation. Norway may have become one of the leaders of forest conservation because roughly a century ago, it was on the brink of losing its own woodlands. In 1919, it actually became the first country in the world to assess the condition of its forests. And the BBC reports now the country has triple the amount of standing wood in forests than it had 100 years ago. Even though the supply chain commitment may be new for Norway, in the past the country has actually offered money to Brazil and Liberia in return for curbing their deforestation. Besides taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and controlling regional climates, rainforests and their wildlife hold the potential for medical discoveries.
A century ago, Norway was on the edge of losing its forests forever. The consumption of CO2 in Norway has increased from 14 million tons in 19th century to 32 million tons in 2011. After Norway banned deforestation, the rate of deforestation has been slowed down by 50% over the past 25 years. Today, Norway has become the first country to ban deforestation. Any product that contributes to deforestation would not be used in the country. Limiting deforestation allowed forests to reduce CO2 concentration.
The Paris Agreement is key to a global solution on climate change. It is a turning point in our fight against global warming and its negative effects. Its success will depend on the strength of our political leadership and our willingness to take action. I'm proud to say that Norway was one of the first states to ratify the Paris Agreement. And I urge countries that have not yet ratified the agreement to do so as quickly as possible. Its entry into force will be a strong signal of the world's commitment to fighting climate change. Norway is already working hard to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. By 2030, together with the EU, we will reduce emissions by at least 40% compared to 1990 levels. We will also continue our international efforts to support climate action, in particular to reduce emissions from tropical forests. Now it's time to roll up our sleeves and really get to work, to build trust and show true leadership. Together, we will make the Paris Agreement work.
participated in EEA agreement since 1994. And then the object of the EEA agreement is to promote a continuous strengthening of trade and economic related between the EEA state and EU member. And then so the Norway politics, since the 1990s, Norwegian climate policy has focused on first education, second public awareness, third training. And then for the activities has been started to give the general public a better understanding of climate change and its effects, as well as better awareness of climate-related issue has been embedded in the education system. Politics, Norway is a developed high-income country compared with others because they produce a lot of stuff and then they have oil and fossil fuel industry. And they are producing better, more carbon than other countries. That's how they have high income. And then the current leading political party in Norway currently is the Conservative Party. Also, the industrialization of Norway has caused growth in specifically oil and fossil fuel industry. That's why they have high income too. And then given this economic, social, historical, and political background, it shows why Norway has the action on climate change now.
So the Norway's position in UNFCCC. Norway committed to the UNFCCC on March 27, 2015. Under the Kyoto Protocol, Norway committed to making sure its greenhouse gas emissions don't exceed the 1990 level by more than 1% in the period 2008 to 2012. The Paris Agreement will come into effect in 2020. It is set to prevent average global temperatures rising above 2 degrees for clean and sustainable development. And governments agreed to submit their NCDs in advance for Paris. And then Norway has maintained constant with its plan to lower emissions despite its booming oil industry. There are some major examples of involvement in UNFCCC. On February 2015, at least 40% reduction of global warming gases in 2030, compared to 1999, to be developed into an emissions budget for the period 2021 to 2030. And on March 2015, Norway submits its climate action plan ahead of Paris 2015 agreement. Priority areas are reduced emissions in the transport sector and low emissions technology in industry, and carbon dioxide to capture and storage, renewable energy, environmentally friendly shipping. And then on the August 2014, among the international activities underpinning efforts to conserve forests is Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative. The goal is to help ensure that forests are included in it. A new international climate and then to take early action to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation in developing countries, and to promote the conservation of natural forests for natural forest areas in order to maintain their carbon storage.
We are proposing an expanded use of renewable energy worldwide. There should be quotas met by each big city dependent on population on how many sources of renewable energy need to be in place. By signing the Paris Agreement, it sets the target goal on where a country wants to have their GHG emissions. Having said, once the country has a goal in mind, they are able to take action and act upon what they have to propose. Also, especially in developed countries, increasing fuel emission standards will make a huge difference in greenhouse gases emitted yearly and reduce big industrialized countries' dependence on fossil fuels. For Norway and many other countries, including the US and China, the petroleum sector is responsible for a large percentage of emissions, which can be reduced with stricter and more enforced permits. Although this may affect the economics of the country, dependent on how involved they are in this industry, this would be a helpful measure to keep oil worldwide from making such a large impact on the earth. We're also proposing an increased international participation in research related to climate change so that each country has responsibility to seek out and gain as much information as possible, emphasizing on areas that they have expertise on. For example, Norway specifically has more knowledge regarding oceanic and coastline behaviors surrounding climate trends.
In terms of social justice and equity, our recommendation will focus on the CO2 tax based on household income, in an effort to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. Increased participation involving global change research would also hopefully give smaller parties like indigenous people more of a voice regarding climate change. From the game, we took away that not all teams were able to fully comprehend the game or how the spreadsheet caused a grade to change with inputs of other countries. This is much like in real life, where indigenous people and others have different knowledge and understand climate change differently. It is difficult to trust every team would agree or stick with an agreement if they decided to act selfishly to make their own grade higher. By doing the role-play exercise, we realized that most countries seem to have a limited view of climate change and are focusing on how they can do individually, rather than the world as a whole. To conclude, Norway is going through major climate change and it is affecting the whole country. They are having an increased rainfall, increased temperature, melting ice, and instability weather patterns. As for the history of climate change, they struggled with fossil fuel usage, deforestation, and economic problems. Norway is working on having their citizens buy electric hybrid cars to help the environment, making it healthier for the people and the country overall. Norway committed to the UNFCCC on March 27, 2015. Under the Kyoto Protocol, they committed to making sure their greenhouse gas emissions do not exceed the 1990 level by more than 1% during 2008-2012. The Paris Agreement will come into effect in 2020. It is said to prevent the average global temperatures rising above 2 degrees Celsius for a clean and sustainable development. Along with this, governments agreed to submit their INCDs in advance for Paris. Norway has maintained constant with its plan to lower emissions despite its booming oil industry. For the Sami people, they do not have much of a voice in such a large international platform like the UNFCCC, but we can assume due to the exponentially larger effects climate change has on these people that they would be in full support of Norway's proposed position.